Hey guys, it's Dave. Thank you for tuning in as always. If you're new here, I hope by the end of this video you'll consider hitting that subscribe button if you found the video interesting and useful. If you're not new here, well, thanks as always for tuning in, and I will be sure to check out your comments down below. Okay, so today we're doing another portfolio update video where I talk about how my portfolio's been doing, what moves I've made, what I'm thinking about with the markets, my stocks, Rocket Lab, other space companies, and just checking in general. These videos don't tend to do as well, if I'm being honest, but I do think there is still some value there when it comes to, seeing that you're not alone if you're going through a rough month, a rough year, and being able to be open about investing and talk about our money, talk about our performance as opposed to being all secretive about it. Plus, you get a lot of posts on social media showing the big gains and everyone's keen to share that, but they're not so keen to share the losses. And I think that can lead to, a bit of a misunderstanding of, oh, I'm doing so crappy because I've only got a 10% return versus this guy out there with a 100% return. So I hope some of you do get value out of this video, although of course, I don't expect it to do as well as some of those other perhaps more splashy topic. So with that out of the way, let's dive into this month's Taking Stock. Alrighty, so starting off with a 1 month return on my portfolio, been pretty flat overall. I think I'm actually down like 1.5% or 2%, but it's been a bit of a wild ride. Started doing quite well, up, and then obviously a big dip and back to flat. So, overall, not the best month for me. Hopefully you guys did better. You can let me know down in the comments if you want. In terms of a 1 year performance chart, I'm now sitting around 24.74%. I did make a tweet about this. If you're on Twitter, please give me a follow and we can continue the discussion there. But it was interesting to talk to various folks and see how their returns varied, although I do think there was a bit of a bias there where people who have had great returns are much more likely to chime in and say how they've done versus people who've had poor returns. But I do think these conversations are important to try and learn from our mistakes, if nothing else. I do think I can do better though, because if we look at the S&P 500 index 1 year return, apparently it's 27.23%, so that 24.74 number slightly underperforming the S&P. However, it's really hard to complain about a 20+% year. If you can do that even somewhat close to consistently, like you'll always have bad years, but if you can average, 15 to 20% on your portfolio over the long run, you'll be flying. You'll be extremely happy. So yeah, can't complain too much about a 24% year. So in terms of my 4-year return now, I really wish I could show you my 5-year because I think that's more of a nice round number. And actually my performance over 5 years would have been much better than just this 4-year period, but more on that later. Annualized out, we're looking at 15.54% or a cumulative return of 62.18%. Not bad. Again, could be better, could be worse. I think if you annualized a long-term investment portfolio and received 15% though, you should be pretty happy. But given all the work I've been putting into this lately, I do want to do better. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how I think things could go better potentially and what I could do to make some improvements. Feel free to let me know your 4-year return down below as well if you'd like to talk about what worked for you. Once again, that 5-year period would have looked a lot better for me, but I don't have the data. And one of the reasons it would have looked better is actually Tesla. Looking at the Tesla stock, this is a large portion of my portfolio and a large reason why I feel like I've underperformed the S&P 500 over the past few years, as Tesla has really not done great. I do have a love-hate relationship with this stock these days, I do have to admit. If you go back a little bit further, Tesla had an absolutely amazing run, and I was in this stock something like 2019. I did get at one point something like a 16x on the stocks, like a 16 multiple return. Absolutely amazing, really euphoric. Should have trimmed at the top. Back then I was like, it's a long-term hold. I'm just going to hold through it all, which can be a good strategy. But I do feel like looking at $400 per share, I've learned a lot about investing since then. Hard to argue that that was justified. I should have taken some gains and trimmed there. I didn't. still doing fine, still have good returns on it, and still plan to hold. Basically, that all comes down to, I think, autonomy. They are in the lead on that as they continue to build and sell more cars, even if it's a long road to a full robotaxi network, which has absolutely insane financial implications. Just getting autonomy very good, and eventually to the point where you don't have to monitor it as closely, I think will ultimately lead to more sales of that subscription, and that revenue is very high margin. Once you don't have to monitor it at all, I think the sales will take off, and then robotaxi, it's a whole nother ball game. But it may be a few years before that story plays out. So long term, still excited about the roadmap of Tesla, but we are in quite a lull right now, and we just have to kind of grin and bear it for this period of 5-ish years, it feels like. But yeah, that I think has had a little bit of a weight on my portfolio over the most recent period. Talking about Rocket Lab, I know I have a ton of Rocket Lab shareholders who are following the channel. That's actually done fairly well for me overall. You can see this chart, the green line showing my cost basis, and if we look at the details up above, I have 15,190 shares of Rocket Lab. My cost basis for that is $66,000. The market value is now $105,000, almost $106,000. Hard to complain about that. Yeah, average price $435, unrealized profits almost $40,000. So pretty pleased with that. I also do have 10 long-term leaps or call options on Rocket Lab. I thought it would be fun to show you guys how this can move so much more differently than the underlying stock. And if you're really confident, it's an option out there. It's definitely risky, high risk, high return, but look at how this one's done. I put $1,000 into this leap because I was feeling very confident that by January 2026, it would be way higher. This is more than doubled already. So just goes to show, right? The stock has had about a 60% return for me, which is great. The option has had 167% return for me, which is amazing. So that just goes to show, if you're really high conviction and you really are willing to handle high risk, can be an option. Now, keep in mind with this, if Rocket Lab is below $7 in January of 2026, I lose my entire initial investment. Whereas with the stock, I'm at no risk of that happening because I really don't see Rocket Lab going out of business. High risk, high return. I am thinking once the wedding is out of the way and I don't have so many expenses, if Rocket Lab stock has a dip, if it starts to get closer to neutron, starts to get closer to profitability, and I still consider it an extremely good bargain, I might just go heavy on some call options, guys. And I know I probably shouldn't advocate this for the channel because it's very high risk and I want to, preach financial responsibility, but I might just do it for myself and really add to that call option position there on the stock. Now, talking Planet Labs, my other current space stock, not done so well, of course. I did buy a few shares, about 600 shares for $4 a share, and we're down at 272. So my cost basis is 2,400, market value 1,600. Not too pleased with the performance of this stock or the revenue growth of the overall company, to be frank. I don't think I'm going to sell, don't think I'm going to add right now. There's other companies I find a little bit more interesting than Planet right now, but I will continue to hold this one. Now, I do like to advocate financial responsibility and not being too crazy with the risk, also holding some safer index funds in your account. This can really help you out, especially during down markets and volatile periods. And I do have a bunch of those. I don't talk about them as much, but I was thinking about making a change on some of these, and it's really, really frustrating me because in order to change some of these funds, I would have to realize huge amounts of capital gains and lose half of that to taxes. So I'm kind of paralyzed and not knowing what to do. I know what I would love to do, but I just don't know if the tax hit is worth making that change. So if we look at some funds here I'd like to get out of, we have a TSX 60, kind of like a Toronto, Canada version of the S&P 500. Generally, I find doesn't do nearly as well as the S&P, and I'd like to move kind of all of these funds over to the NASDAQ 100 or the S&P. I'm pretty comfortable with the risk trade-off there, and I think the performance would be better over the long run while still providing some diversification and safety to the portfolio. But all these numbers are in Canadian. If we're looking at selling that, the U.S. Total Markets Index, S&P again, capped composite, and global markets outside of Canada and the U.S., we're looking at a potential of $81,000, all numbers Canadian, of capital gains. Now, I'll be taxed at a 50% rate if I were to sell this because they're not in my tax-free account. That's $40,000 I would have to pay, almost $41,000 in taxes to make the move to the NASDAQ and the S&P. And I just don't know if that hit is worth it in the short term, because right now, you know, the gains are compounding on that overall higher number figure. So I'd have to take that hit and then get those gains compounding on a lower number to make that switch. So that's what I'm really struggling with right now. Something I would really like to do, but I just don't know if I can justify paying that much in taxes to do it. Now, if you do look at these index funds and the returns they've had over long periods, talking 20 years here, according to this chart, NASDAQ and S&P have outperformed the TSX as well as pretty much the rest of the world, and those are the ones I would like to move to. So over the long run, we're talking 10, 20 years, probably would pay off to take that short-term hit on the taxes, but man, I don't know if I can bring myself to do it. Let me know what you think I should do here on this safe side. I'm sure a lot of you will just say, hey, screw it, go all in on Rocket Lab or other stocks, but I like to advocate a little bit of fiscal responsibility when it comes to your own investing accounts as well. So that's where I am right now, obviously on a 1-month basis, not the best month, but I don't like to read too much into that much of a short-term period. Doing fine over a 4-year and 1-year basis, but I think there's room for improvement, and it's important to look at these things to see how we can improve. I'm pretty happy with my Rocket Lab returns, not so happy with Tesla over the last 4 years, but I'm going to continue to hold that. And just really struggling with this tax issue because I really hate not holding the things I want to hold. Very frustrating to me, but at the same time, I also don't want to have to take a massive tax hit. Ultimately, though, that's a good problem to have, and when you're worried about capital gains, it's a sign that something has been going right for you. Because I remember early on, for me, when I started investing, capital gains weren't really a huge concern. Please do let me know how your investments have been going down below, what moves you're thinking of making. I love to help each other here and share trade ideas. Definitely have made some money over the years by sharing ideas with other folks out on the internet, and we talk about it a lot on the Discord server as well, which is linked down below. And I do think being open with these things is very important to improving your performance and how you think about these things. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.